Next, we have highlights of the summer 2020 physical properties update. Dr. Swift.
Thank you, President Johnson and trustees. This is always one of our favorite fall presentations. And of course, like everything, it takes on different significance in the midst of our COVID situation. But I'm pleased to share that Emil Laudsana and Bernard Rice, who is our Executive Director of Physical Properties. They have been busy all summer. And in fact, trustees, as you well know, they began last spring preparing for our summer projects. So they're actually going to give you a great update on the work that's going on, along with a lot of great photos. I appreciate, trustees, that you often approve projects, and it's not every day that you get to see them turn out and see. A lot of your work is about planting the seeds, and it is not always about getting to reap the harvest of that. So I love this presentation because it's an opportunity for you and for our community to see how their dollars are being invested. Every dollar, we work to be good stewards of every dollar and to put those dollars in service to our children. So we're pleased to share that report. They are also going to tuck in some of the work, immense work that's being completed to prepare our buildings for a COVID-informed hybrid and full operations. So they're going to touch on that subject, and we will consider that a preview. And trustees, coming to you during October is a presentation dedicated to that work, which opens up so many areas of our work around water quality, air quality. You can go on down the list. So they're going to give us a little preview of that as well. I do believe this may be the first time that Mr. Bernard Rice is sharing with the trustees. So it is my great honor to introduce him publicly. I know that he has been working hard with us for a little over 2 years now, I believe, right, Bernard? And Bernard has a several decade of strong experience in school facilities management. And he has been working hard right alongside Emil Laudsana to ensure that our buildings are in good shape. And trustees, you're aware that just because we're on virtual learning status doesn't mean that we don't have things break or that things don't need their maintenance. In fact, we're doing a lot of extra work right now to make sure that our vacant buildings are in good shape and healthy. And trustees, you have more of those updates coming next week with a few more things that need repairing and projects that need completed. So with that, Mr. Laudsana, I believe, is leading this off, and we're excited for them to share our fall facilities projects update. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Swift, and good evening, Board of Education. I am going to attempt a screen share here. I am hoping that this will go pretty smoothly. I'm pleased to be here tonight speaking. We'll overview our summer construction and maintenance projects initially, and then we will get into our school reoccupancy preparations, in particular focusing tonight on what we've been doing with an elementary focus. Some of these things change as we move into the older, working with older student populations. We'll talk about our heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, health and wellness, signage, social distancing preparations, and then Mr. Rice will discuss what we're doing with our plumbing systems and the cleaning and sanitizing of our buildings. In the tradition of Mr. Dimitriou, who kind of mentored me into this position, we traditionally have a musical slideshow. So tonight, I hope you enjoy it, and we'll take a look at some of the projects. Thank you, everyone, for your generous support of the sinking fund. And as the song says, when we do go back, it'll be better than before. And we're happy to be able to make improvements to our schools, even under these historically trying times. All right, so we're going to talk briefly, and again, we'll have a more full briefing for the board at a later date, but we'll talk about heating, ventilation, air conditioning, HVAC systems, health and wellness signage, social distancing preparations, plumbing systems, and cleaning and sanitizing. We've retained and have partnered with Fishback consulting engineers with multiple locations in the state of Michigan in maximizing the healthy operation of our school building HVAC systems, and that's focused on a number of areas. Maximizing the provision of outside fresh air in our school buildings, maximizing the effectiveness of our air filtration systems, and developing algorithms for operating our AAPS buildings in an enhanced indoor air quality sequence that will allow for maximizing ventilation based on outside weather conditions. So they've prepared a summary of the work that they're doing with us. And this diagram in the upper right shows the basic configuration of an HVAC system. Do you see my cursor, President Johnson? Yes, excellent. Yes, so the basic operation of an HVAC ventilation system, you have a provision for outside air, and then you do have some return air from the space. That's due to it's very difficult to 100% bring in outside air under a lot of conditions because you have so much energy input that you need to provide. So you often will mix outside and inside air, and there's a mechanism called a damper, which allows you to provide more or less outside fresh air depending on what type of a mode you're trying to run in. Those air streams mix, and then they're discharged into the occupied space. And so as part of this effort, they are reviewing our control system, modifying our sequences to allow for increased outside air, and developing this emergency mode or enhanced ventilation sequence for our building automation system, which controls things like that damper you see there in that graphic. Another thing that they're doing as they're commissioning our systems is looking at the filtration and where we're able to increase the filtration level of the filters that are in our systems. So for instance, you see in their graphic, MERV 8 through 9 filters range in thickness from 1 to 2. And then when you get into the MERV 13s, they're often upwards of 4 inches thick. And then HEPA filters become quite a bit thicker. And there are some restrictions in terms of both this physical space that's available in the equipment to fit a larger or a thicker filter. And there's also limits of how much the capacity of a fan to move air through a more dense filter. So the denser the filter, the less airflow you get. And at a certain point, you significantly reduce the airflow if you try to increase the density of the filter. And this can cause, for instance, this filter here is collapsed and there's gaps. And so they're looking at all of these things around our filters and providing us recommendations on a case-by-case, building-by-building evaluation. This image of the sort of this T-shaped gray image is out of our building automation system. We have these graphical representations in our building automation system. This is an engineering representation of this unit ventilator, which is a very common piece of equipment in many of our buildings. It has an outside damper that lets outside air. In this graphic, you see where the outside air is coming in. Here's the damper and a second damper. Then you have the recirculated air. They mix at some percentage and they move across a filter medium, are pulled through by a fan, and then you have your discharge air going back into the space. So they're looking at how much increased ventilation can we provide, and depending on the piece of equipment, and that, again, it's tied to outside temperature, 40 to 100% outside air provision. They're looking at the filters. We're also developing extended equipment schedules. So we'll be operating the equipment 2 hours prior to occupancy and 2 hours after occupancy to be sure we're really flushing the buildings out. And in the cases where we have CO2 monitoring, that's a device that measures the amount of carbon dioxide in a space. It's, for whatever reason, it's easier to monitor CO2 than to measure oxygen levels, but it's basically an indicator of how many people are in the space. When your CO2 levels rise, that means that there are lots of people in the space, and so it would kick on more ventilation as that CO2 sensor indicates. So that's a basic sort of unit ventilator ventilation system. Another type of, this is more of an air handling unit that serves multiple rooms. It's a very similar graphic. You have your outside air ventilation, your dampers, your recirculated air passes over a filtration medium, is pulled through by a fan, and then it goes out in ductwork to various different spaces. Again, they're looking at this. How much outside air can we bring in? How good of a filter can we have? And is the filter properly installed and effective? And then maximizing our ability through the building automation system to control these systems to make sure we're getting the best ventilation possible with the equipment that we have. Another area we've been working on is health and wellness signage. And how we help our students and staff maintain social distance and other things in our buildings. Some of these sign types include in only and exit only door locations, so we minimize crossing traffic in our buildings, social distancing, self-screening reminders, one-way, hallway, and staircase dots, if you will, that encourage people to walk on the right side of spaces so that we're not getting that, again, that mixing. So we've got some dots, 4 dots I'll be showing you in a minute. And then looking at maximum occupancy signage for places like restrooms, elevators, media centers, and other spaces that are used by multiple people. so that we don't get overcrowding and are able to maintain distance as best as possible. And of course, hand washing reminders. So the work that Stantec is helping us with looks something like this. This is the floor plan of Pittsfield School. And you can see the social distancing dots in the hallways, and then all of the different sign types and their locations are indicated on the floor plans. So those sign types look something like this. Again, the enter only, exit only, do not enter. You would, for instance, the exit or the enter signs. Visitors to use main entrance only, maximum occupancy, and we'll look at examples of all these signs in just a second here. So this is the entrance only and the exit only signage. Do not enter. We're looking at a wellness check-in location, a table with a plexiglass where people who maybe don't have PPE or are not feeling well as they're entering the school, and that there would be someone there visually observing incoming traffic. And we are encouraging that we do get visitors in our buildings that do tend to enter places that are not the front door, and we'll be posting all visitors use main entrance at other locations where people might historically have gone to, say, pick up their students or something like that. These are the hallway circulation dots that we saw in the previous floor plan. It's a sort of stay in your lane is the tagline that we've come up with. And these would be placed on opposite sides of the floor. Obviously, one arrow pointing in one direction, the other arrow pointing in the other direction, so that we did study putting the signage in the middle of the floor, but we feel like, especially at elementary, there's going to be a real tendency to want to hop on these things and sort of, as you're moving down the hallway, jump on the elephant tracks, if you will. So we opted to have them on two sides of the hallway and not sort of try to draw a line down the middle that might be something that students would tend to try to walk on. These are smaller social distancing reminder dots that could be used will be used in staircases to encourage, again, people to separate and not commingle and cross traffic flows. These will also be used in other locations like around drinking fountains and offices and other places where you would tend to have queues. We would have these 6 feet apart, indicating where people are supposed to stand. Very similar to what you would see in a grocery store or a convenience store today. This is the maximum occupancy sign. Again, places like elevators, restrooms, media centers, other shared spaces that we would want to limit the number of people at one time. And then the health and wellness signage. The CDC has a lot of great signs that they've made for K-12 districts and others. So these have things like, what we've all come to know: wash your hands, wear a mask, social distance, cover your mouth when you sneeze or cough, etc. They have these really fun wash your hands signs. I'm a big fan of Supergirl here, reminding us to fight germs and wash our hands. And these would be posted at any source of water where people would be able to wash their hands. And then we are also working with Stantec. Our classrooms are all different sizes. Generally, they're rectangles, but they're not always rectangles. So we have a lot of different classroom configurations that we'll need to develop on a school-by-school basis, working with the school administrators and staff. But the basic idea, as you see in this slide, is you designate a teacher zone, and then you designate student areas as best you can in the space. And again, our classrooms range in size, in configuration, in proportion. So it's an individualized layout by school and by classroom, but this is the basic concept that we're looking at. And so I think that's my last slide, and we're going to hand it off to Mr. Rice, who, I got one more, sneeze guards. And we're all very familiar with the concept of sneeze guards. And here you see in the slide with the table, that's kind of the concept of the wellness check-in station. And then you can see the office partitions. In some cases, we're installing them more physically. In other cases where we're not able to do that, we've designed and had fabricated these more portable, movable ones. So if, when our carpenters are setting it up and we put it where we think we want it, but then they start using it, they're able to move it to the location that they feel is most appropriate in practice. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Mr. Rice, who's going to talk to us about plumbing systems.
Thank you, Mr. Lozano. Good evening, trustees and Dr. Swift. I just want to point out, I was going to start off with a quote that Trustee Lightfoot made me think about, that all the little nuances that a lot of people don't realize. And John Willard Marriott, when he first started his hotel in 1957, said success is all about the details. And I feel that Ann Arbor is strictly all about the details. That's what success is about. So when I talk about plumbing systems, we talk about all the little things. So since March, while our buildings were unoccupied, we had set a plan together about flushing our systems, and we set it up so that it was done once a week. And it was done in the middle of the week so that people would have the opportunity to actually complete the whole school during that week. So it's helped prevent the growth of Legionnaire bacteria, which everybody's worried about right now, but we've been constantly flushing our systems weekly. So we have also just started implementing a plan to test all our waters in AAPS schools for Legionella disease and E. coli. We have just completed our biannual replacement of all our drinking water filters, which takes some time. There's quite a few of those, by the way. Those little nuances that people don't realize that, there's 1,600 of these that has to be installed. We have removed in the diagram that you see is our hydration stations. We have removed the bubblers from these systems, so then put a cap on them, and it looks pretty professional with the cap on it, so you can't really tell that it's actually missing something. We have begun to transition to touchless restroom fixtures, and we started with the outliers of our district because we had sports. So we did all the outbuildings, all like stadiums, those types of things first. And then we went to the hydration stations, and now we're working towards doing all the gang bathrooms in every building. Then we're going to go to the classrooms after that. We have removed all the hand dryers and we replaced them with touchless paper towel dispensers. This was a big thing that what the CDC was on us about. So cleaning and sanitizing. This is another big one. Frequently touched surfaces, including light switches, doors, benches, bathrooms. We will clean every 4 hours with the EPA approved disinfectant. And the touch points are telephones, computers, electronics, anything that students touch, their desks, the tables, the light switches, the door handles, the chairs that they sit in, pencil sharpeners, and all metal surfaces. Staff will wear appropriate protection, PPE equipment when cleaning. Custodial staff will rarely check and restock soap, hand sanitizers, and paper towel dispensers. Doors will be propped open to minimize the surface of contact. And when we did our walkthrough at Pittsfield, we did notice that there was a lot of doors that don't have an automatic door opener. So we had to make door stops. And that's some of the things that we were constantly revolving about what we were going to do. Hand sanitizers will be provided in all occupied spaces, and there'll be between 3 or 4 at every school entrance. This is the USA Environmental Protection Agency and Center of Disease Control Disinfectant Techniques. As you can see, the products and the systems that the EPA listed as products: electrostatic sprayer, ultraviolet zone and steam, fogging, and ultrasonic waves and LED lights. The recommendation is that we try to do all of these. We have done the first 2, and We have labeled instructions, approval application methods, and required contact times. So with first two, we have designated what product we're using, and we have purchased electrostatic sprayers to do every classroom. Ultraviolet and ozone and steam, we need a little bit more information on this, and EPA is reviewing that. They don't know how effective it is on COVID-19, but so we haven't gone that route. Fogging, a lot of people have gone away from fogging because it takes too long. Plus, there's also an increase in hazard chemical exposure, and there's really no benefit from this that they have come up with yet. So they're still evaluating that. The ultrasonic waves and the LED lights, there's not enough data for us to say that we really need to do this. Here are some of the references. We use the CDC, we use ASHRAE, and the School Superintendents Association and the American Institute of Architects. These are the ones that we constantly get information from. And so these are some of the guidelines and stuff that we use when we're actually preparing for success within our buildings. And thank you.
All right. Well, with that, thank you, Mr. Lozano. Mr. Rice, congratulations. Your first briefing of the board. You did great.
Thank you.